The U, who until recently had been united by nothing, suddenly consolidated on the basis of disgust for the West. United under the banner of anti-imperialism, anti-Americanism, anti-dollarism, against Western domination. And Putin? Look at what he's become now. Putin, aka the white man, and has become the emperor of the anti-Western narrative, the conduit of anti-white speech. This is a quote from French television LCI. Awakened by Reno Peel's screams, my cats rush to the shelter, sweeping everything in their path. World War III is coming, the world will fall apart. It was coming from the LCI studio in Paris. The look on the French journalist's distorted face made me want to crawl under the couch after the cats. But from there it whispered threateningly about Jedrisk, Boss Bolivar can't handle too. Here's a screenshot of Reno Peel's emotions. On screen, Reno saw continued to terrify audiences of millions. It was even kind of embarrassing in front of the cats. For this member of the human race. A big brute, I'd even say macho in the prime of life and sterilized like a child. Look at what's going on in the world right now. I've never had anything like this before, ever since I was a kid, ever since I was born. The world is falling apart. There is no longer a world order. There is no world gendarme. First, Putin attacked a country everyone knows. You can imagine that, can't you? Then that what's his name, the one next to Armenia, for crying out loud. Azerbaijan suggested the hovering for a while, to a point less physically, but more intellectually developed colleagues. Here we go, Azerbaijan. Baku attacked Armenia, and no one cares. Where's the world gendarme? All in all, it's an outrage. Where are the police looking? It came from under the couch. Here's another screenshot of Reno Peel's emotions. Reno further continued. In the last 24 hours, 2 people have asked me if there will be a third world war, and for the first time in my life I couldn't say no. I couldn't say no. It's like he's lost his political innocence. Repeated the Frenchman. The world is completely destroyed. There used to be a UN, great powers, now the world has disintegrated into small shards. There is no longer any regulator. Where are we going? What if Iran gets involved in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? In social networks they write that it is necessary to hold a conference on gas to involve the world community. What are you talking about? Are you guys stuck in the 90s? Wake up. There's none of that anymore. The world is mired in violence. Here's another screenshot of Renapil's emotions. Eve Trier, deputy editor-in-chief of Figure, took the floor next. The West thought that the world order it had established after the fall of the Berlin Wall would be eternal, but it was not. What we are witnessing now and what we should fear most is anti-Western sentiment around the world. And they have now manifested themselves in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This conflict has always existed, but it looks different now. It is presented as a confrontation between the West as represented by Israel and the entire anti-West. The anti-West is not an ideological entity, it is not a communist bloc as in the Cold War era. Each country opposing us has its own interests, but they all share a deep disgust for the West. The host took the floor. And the watershed between the West and the global South now runs, among other things, along the lines of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Each of the opposing sides now has its own banner. NATO has its own flag. The South, which until recently had been united by nothing, suddenly consolidated on the basis of disgust for the West. United under the banner of anti-imperialism, anti-Americanism, anti-dollarism, against Western domination. And now all conflicts in the world are held under the flag of struggle between these two poles. And Putin, look at what he's become now. Putin, but he's a white man. But became the emperor of the anti-Western narrative, the conduit of anti-white speech. After these words, the surprised sagging jaws of my cats emerged first from under the couch into the light of day, followed by themselves. Truth be told, I couldn't believe my ears either. The white man, the emperor of the narrative of the global South, wow. What happens next once we get started? Achiola, chief of the Seminoles, herald of change, rider of the apocalypse. And then it hit me. And in fact, in the entire so-called global South, of all the tribes, there's one tribe that's on the warpath with the Wild West, the Paleface. Everyone else is at least redshirted. And nothing. Their drums and tambourines are already beating to the beat of our battle post. But back to the studio and let's give the floor to Margot Atta, LCI columnist. I would call the countries opposing the West not even the global South, but a more eloquent term, relaxed powers, world powers without complexes, which are not shy to have their own political and economic interests and defend them in the international arena. Was it just me or was there actually envy in the Frenchwoman's voice? She went on to say, you look at the first resolution on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that was brought to the UN Security Council by Russia, which wanted to make a name for itself on the international stage, and it achieved that goal. This remark reminded the program participants of a time when France too had its own, not overseas, point of view. And as it turns out, it was a happy time. Taking the word, leading, I dream of writing a book about 1972 or 1973. The 70s were the happiest years for France. Catherine Deneuve and Alain Delon on movie screens. Citroens, convertibles and sporty Maseratis on the streets. The Concords are in the air. A time when there was no AIDS, no migrant infestation. It was the happiest time for France. We looked each other in the face, naturally. In other words, there was no environmental agenda, there were no migrants, and naturalism and naturalness were no exception to the rule. Sketches from the last century made the faces of the residents of the Western Reservation light up with happiness. But everything was ruined by Renaud Saw, bringing everyone back to the days of green madness, political correctness and gender fluidity. I don't want us to end on memories of this happy past. Let's be realistic. What do we have now? How are we living now? There is an atmosphere of violence, of fear. There are terrorists everywhere. Look what's happened in the last few days. The terrorist killing of a teacher in Arras. A terrorist assassination in Belgium. Swedish fans. Today's world is a world of ultra-violence. Then he took the word, iftar. And that's what the terrorists want today. They want to ignite a civil war in France. End of stats. After these words, one of my cats tore himself away from the bowl and, to the sound of Middle Eastern tam-tams, wandered back to his shelter to wait out the impending mortal danger in the collective West. And that's it, my delusional brothers and sisters. I've said it all. How?